There is a place that exists somewhere between memory and the edge of sleep, a place that feels as though it has always been there, waiting quietly for you to find it. It is not a place of brightness or noise. It is a place of low ceilings and dark timber, of fire at the center of a long room, of warmth that has been carefully tended through many long nights before this one. You do not need to know exactly how you arrived. What matters is that you are here now, and the door behind you has been closed against the cold, and the air around you is thick with the smell of wood smoke and pine resin and something faintly herbal, like dried thyme or juniper, hanging in long bundles from the beams above. You are inside a Viking Longhouse, and the night outside is very still, and you are safe. The Longhouse is longer than you first imagined when you stepped through its low entrance. It stretches away from you in both directions, this great hall of timber and earth and woven wool, and at its center burns a fire that is not large or dramatic, but simply steady, the kind of fire that has been burning for a long time and knows how to burn without being asked. The flames sit low and orange inside a long hearth of flat stones, and the smoke rises slowly, drifting upward toward an opening in the thatched roof where the night air waits patiently to receive it. The light from the fire does not reach every corner of the Longhouse. It pools gently in the middle of the room and fades before it gets very far, leaving the edges of the space in a soft, comfortable darkness that feels less like absence and more like rest. You have been welcomed here. There were not many words spoken when you arrived, just a gesture toward the warmth, a nod, the kind of quiet acknowledgement that people offer when they understand that a traveler needs rest more than conversation. The people of this Longhouse are large and unhurried, wrapped in wool and fur, and most of them are already settled for the night, their bodies arranged along the wide wooden benches that line both sides of the room. These benches are built into the walls like long shelves, raised a little above the earthen floor, and they are covered in layers of animal hide and coarse blanket and woven cloth, so that lying on one of them is something like lying on a field that has been carefully prepared for sleep. You have been given your own place near the fire, not so close that the heat is uncomfortable, but near enough to feel it moving across your face in slow, gentle waves. There is a bundle of furs waiting for you, heavy, dark furs that smell of lanolin and the outdoors, furs that have kept other people warm on other cold nights, and now they are ready to keep you warm on this one. You pull them over yourself slowly, without hurry, and they settle across your body with a kind of weight that feels deliberate and kind, as though they understand what it is you need. You arrange them a little around your shoulders, pulling them up just enough to cover the back of your neck, and then you are still, and the furs are still, and the fire burns on just as it was burning before you made any adjustment at all. The fire crackles now and then quietly. It is not a loud fire. It does not demand attention. It simply burns and occasionally shifts, and when a log settles deeper into the heat, there is a soft sound, a small sighing sound, and then the fire is still again, and the light moves across the wooden beams above in long, slow patterns. You watch those patterns for a while. The shadows drift and return, like something breathing, like the Longhouse itself is breathing around you, slowly and without effort. The patterns have no meaning, and they are not asking you to find any. They are simply light and darkness moving in the way that light and darkness always move when a fire burns in an enclosed space. And watching them requires nothing more than the simple turning of your eyes toward the ceiling and the willingness to let whatever you see be enough. Somewhere near the door, a dog is sleeping. You cannot see it clearly from where you lie, but you can hear it. The occasional slow exhale, the small sound of its body shifting on the straw, the way its breath rises and falls in a rhythm that matches nothing except its own deep comfort. Dogs that sleep this deeply have found something that many creatures spend their whole lives looking for, and listening to the breath of a sleeping dog in a warm room is one of the quietest pleasures that a night like this can offer. The dog does not know you are listening. It does not know anything right now except the texture of the straw beneath it and the warmth of the room around it, and whatever dream, if dogs dream, is moving through its sleeping mind. The beams above you are dark from years of smoke, stained a deep brown that is almost black at the highest point of the roof, fading to a softer amber color where the firelight reaches them most easily. They are thick beams, old beams, cut from trees that once stood in a forest you will never visit, and they have held this roof in place through many winters, through wind and snow, and the long dark months when the sun barely rises and the cold comes very close. You can feel the age of them just by looking. There is something restful about very old things that have been in their place for so long that they have stopped needing to prove themselves. Things that simply exist and hold and endure. The beams ask nothing of the room below them. They only hold. The smell of the Longhouse is all around you now, and it is not unpleasant. There is the wood smoke, of course, that warm and slightly sweet smell that reminds you of evenings, and the end of things, of days winding down into night. Beneath it, there is the smell of the earth floor, the dark, damp smell of ground that has been walked on for generations, and has absorbed something of every person who has ever crossed it. There is the smell of the wool hanging on the walls, great panels of it in rough browns and undyed creams, woven with simple patterns of line and diamond, hung there to keep the cold from coming through the timber. And there is that herbal smell, quiet and faint, drifting down from the bundles of dried plants that hang in the upper reaches of the room, their identity soft by the smoke into something peaceful and indistinct. All of these smells together make the smell of this place, and it is the smell of shelter, of refuge, of a space that has been made warm and held warm by deliberate human effort, and breathing it in is an act that is in itself a kind of resting. You let your eyes close for a moment, then open them again. The fire is still there. The beams are still above you. The dog near the door is still breathing. Nothing has changed, and nothing is going to change, and that is the most comforting thing you can imagine right now. The world outside this longhouse may be wide and cold and full of movement, but in here everything is settled, everything is still, everything has found its place for the night and is content to remain there. You are among those things now, those settled and still things, and it is not difficult to remain there, to allow yourself to be one more element of the room's general stillness. The furs over you as natural and right as the wool on the walls or the coals in the hearth. The people sleeping nearby make very little sound. Occasionally there is the slow turn of a body on a bench, the rustle of furs being adjusted, the soft sound of breath shifting from one rhythm to another. These sounds come and go without pattern, without urgency, and they remind you that you are not alone in this long room, that you are held within a loose and gentle community of sleepers, each of them resting in their own quiet way, each of them giving themselves over to the night without resistance. To be among sleeping people is a particular kind of comfort. It is the comfort of shared surrender, of everyone in a room having agreed, without speaking, to put aside whatever they were carrying and simply rest. You are part of that agreement now. You have added your own silence to the silence of the room. You feel the weight of your own tiredness now, not as something heavy or uncomfortable, but as something natural, something that has been waiting for you to notice it. It is in your shoulders, that tiredness, and in the long muscles of your legs, and in the soft area behind your eyes, where the day has been stored, and is now slowly being released. You do not need to do anything with this tiredness except allow it. It will do the rest on its own. It knows what it is doing. Tiredness, when it is real tiredness, when it is the tiredness that comes from having moved through the world for a long time and arrived somewhere warm and safe, is not something to resist. It is the body's way of preparing itself for what comes next, which is nothing, which is rest, which is the long, uncomplicated dark of a good night's sleep in a warm place. The fire shifts again, and a small ember rolls to the edge of the hearth and glows there briefly, very orange, very round, before it dims. You watch it dim. It takes longer than you expect, that small ember, and its light fades in such a gradual way that you cannot quite say when it stops being light and starts being something else. That is how most things end in a place like this, not with a sudden stopping, but with a slow trailing away into quiet, the way the edge of evening becomes the beginning of night, the way a voice becomes a murmur, becomes a breath, becomes silence. Everything in this room fades rather than stops, and there is grace in that, a kind of mercy in the gradual instead of the abrupt. The wool hangings on the walls move very slightly. There must be a small current of air somewhere in the room, too gentle to feel on your skin, but strong enough to stir the loosest threads at the edges of the panels. They move in the slowest possible way, barely a movement at all, more like the suggestion of movement, the idea that something might be shifting if you watched very carefully for a very long time. You watch them for a little while, those slow threads, and they are like watching water on a quiet day, like watching the surface of a pond when the wind has moved on and the water is returning to itself. The threads lift and settle, in a motion so small it might be your own eyes making it, the slight involuntary movement of tired eyes that are trying to hold their focus and finding very gently that it is not worth the effort. The child sleeping 2 benches away has not stirred since before you settled in. She lies on her side, wrapped entirely in a dark blanket, only the top of her head visible, her hair spread out across the hide beneath her. She sleeps the way only children can sleep, completely and without reservation, her body given over to rest without any of the hesitations that come with age. Watching her sleep is peaceful. It is a reminder that sleep is not something complicated, that it is simply a return, a coming back to something that was always there. Children do not negotiate with sleep. They simply go like stepping from the edge of a river into water that has always been the right temperature, and they are gone, and the sleep holds them, and they ask nothing of it, and it asks nothing of them. Outside the Longhouse, the night is doing what night does. The cold is settling deeper into the ground and the trees and the stones, making itself at home in the way that cold does in the long dark seasons of the north. The wind that was present earlier in the evening has become something smaller now, just a quiet movement through the branches of the trees nearest the longhouse, a sound that barely reaches you through the thick walls of timber and turf. Now and then that small wind finds one of the gaps in the thatching above, and when it does, a smoke from the fire responds, leaning gently to one side before it continues its slow journey upward. The wind does not enter the room. It only announces itself briefly, and then moves on, and the smoke straightens again, and the room is unchanged. You shift slightly under the furs, adjusting the position of your head on the folded cloth you have been given to use as a pillow. The adjustment is small, the slightest turning, and once you have made it, everything feels correct again, aligned at ease. There is a particular pleasure in finding the right position for sleep, in the moment when the body stops searching and simply arrives at where it needed to be. You are there now. You have arrived. The cloth beneath your cheek is coarse but not rough, and it carries a faint smell that is not quite any one thing, just the accumulated warmth of the room, and your cheek rests against it without complaint. The fire gives off a warmth that you can feel on the parts of your face that are above the furs. It is not a burning warmth, not the kind that makes you want to turn away. It is the warmth of proximity, of something gentle and persistent, a warmth that does not insist but simply offers, and you are free to accept as much or as little of it as you like. You accept it freely. It feels like something given without expectation, and that is the best kind of warmth. It does not ask to be noticed or appreciated. It simply radiates from the coals and reaches across the space between the hearth and where you lie, and by the time it reaches you, it has traveled far enough to be soft, to have lost any intensity it might once have had, to be nothing more than a gentle presence on your skin. The longhouse smells a little of the animals that have been brought inside during the cold. There is a corner at the far end of the room, just visible in the dimness, where a few goats stand quietly, their sides moving with their breath, their eyes half closed. They do not seem bothered by the sleeping people or the fire or the night. They exist in their corner with the same calm assurance as everything else in this room, as though they too understand that this is a place for stillness and rest. One of them lowers its head slowly, searching for something on the ground, and then raises it again, and then is still. The goats belong here as much as anyone. They were brought inside because of the cold, and the warmth of their bodies contributes something to the warmth of the room, and their quiet is part of the room's quiet, and their stillness is part of the room's stillness. You watch the fire for a long time, or perhaps it is not a long time. Time moves strangely in firelight, stretching and compressing according to its own preferences. The flames are small now, mostly at the base of the logs where the wood is hottest, and they do not leap or dance the way fire sometimes does when it is young and new. They simply move quietly and without apparent purpose, the orange deepening to red in the places where the heat is greatest, the edges of the flame fading to a golden transparency that you can almost see through. It is a very old fire, this one, in the sense that all fires in longhouses like this are old, built from the same practice of building fires that goes back further than anyone can count. The people who built this fire learned from people who had built fires before them, and those people had learned from people before them, and so on back through the long chain of cold nights and warm rooms to the very beginning of warmth itself. The sounds of the night have settled into a pattern now, though it is not a rigid or formal pattern, just a loose arrangement of recurring things, the breath of the dog, the occasional small sound from the goats, the crackle of the fire, the distant movement of the wind in the trees. These sounds layer on top of one another in a way that is neither random nor arranged, just present, just here, filling the silence without replacing it. Silence and sound coexist in this room the way day and night sometimes seem to coexist at the edges of evening, each one present without quite canceling the other. The silence is underneath. It holds all the sounds the way dark water holds the reflections of things above it, gently and without effort, showing them clearly without becoming them. Your breathing has slowed, though you have not tried to slow it. The body knows how to do this on its own, given the right conditions, given warmth and darkness, and the absence of anything that needs attending to. Each breath comes a little more slowly than the one before it, a little more easily, a little more completely, until breathing feels less like an action, and more like something that simply happens, like the tide coming in, like the fire burning, like the snow falling outside in the dark without anyone asking it to. You breathe in the warm air of the room, and you breathe out, and the room receives your breath without comment, and then you breathe in again, and this continues, effortlessly and without direction, the way it has continued every moment of your life, without you needing to think about it. You think in a distant and unhurried way about the journey that brought you here, not the details of it. Those are already fading, already becoming indistinct, the way things at the edges of your vision blur when you focus on something near. What remains is more like a feeling, the feeling of having moved through open space and cold air and arrived at something warm, the feeling of a door closing behind you and a fire appearing before you, the feeling of being received into a place that was already there, already burning, already full of sleeping people and the slow sounds of the night. That feeling is enough. That feeling is complete. You do not need to think further than that feeling. It contains everything that needs to be contained. The furs are very warm now, warmed by your body, and they no longer smell quite the way they did when you first pulled them over yourself. Now they smell of warmth itself, that particular smell that has no source except the simple fact of one warm thing being close to another warm thing. You are inside that warmth. You are part of it. The warmth and you are now the same thing, and it would be difficult to say where one ends and the other begins. The boundary between you and the furs is just a sensation, a pressure, a presence, and it does not divide so much as connect, the way a shore connects the water to the land rather than separating them. One of the sleepers on the far bench turns over slowly in their sleep, the furs rustling softly with the movement. They settle again almost immediately, their breathing steady and undisturbed, and the room is quiet once more. This is how nights in places like this are made, from small movements and returns to stillness, from sounds that come and then are absorbed back into the quiet, from the ongoing presence of people and animals and fire, each of them doing nothing more than what they do, which is to say, resting, breathing, being still. The room accommodates each small movement and then returns to what it was, the way water accommodates a stone dropped into it, and then smooths itself again. You let your eyes close again, and this time you leave them closed for longer. The darkness behind your eyelids is warm and orange from the fire, not black but a deep dark red that pulses faintly with the movement of the flames. It is a pleasant darkness, a darkness with color in it, and you stay there for a while, watching it in the way that you might watch water, without expectation, without wanting it to be anything other than what it is. The color shifts very slowly, the orange moving to something darker and then back again, and you do not try to track these changes or make sense of them. You simply observe in the loosest possible way, from the beginning of observation, where the self is still present, but barely, where watching and resting are almost the same thing. When you open your eyes again, the fire has burned a little lower. The logs are smaller now, reduced to something more like coals, and the flames are quieter, more patient, as though they have decided to rest as well. The light they give off is softer than before, a deeper amber, and the shadows on the ceiling are less distinct. The whole room settling into a darker, more uniform dimness that feels exactly right for this hour of the night. Things look better in this light, softer and less particular, less themselves and more part of the room, more part of the general warmth and quiet that the room has become. You do not know what hour it is. There is no way to know here, except by the behavior of the fire and the depth of the quiet and the particular quality of the darkness outside the small gap in the thatching above. By all of those measures, it is late. It is the deep middle of the night, the part that belongs entirely to sleep, the part that daylight has not yet begun to reach for. You are in the right place for this hour. You are exactly where you should be. The night is at its deepest, and you are at your stillest, and the room is at its quietest, and all of these things are aligned in the way that things align, when nothing is working against anything else, when the conditions are simply right. The dog near the door shifts in its sleep, a small and involuntary movement, the kind of movement that comes from whatever it is that dogs dream about. Its paws make a slight motion against the straw, running somewhere in its sleep, and then it stills, and its breath returns to its even rhythm, and the room is unchanged. You have watched so many small things tonight, the ember that faded, the threads that moved, the dog that shifted, and all of them have returned to stillness. And this is comforting, this returning, this natural tendency of things to come back to rest. The room does not hold these movements. It lets them pass, and then it is what it was, and what it is quiet. The Longhouse holds the warmth very well. Even now, with the fire lower than it was, the air inside is soft, and even without the cold drafts that you might expect from a building made of timber and thatch. The walls are thick, the wool hangings add their own layer of insulation, and the warmth given off by the sleeping bodies of many people and a few goats is not insignificant. This is a warm room, and it has been a warm room for a long time, and it will go on being a warm room through the rest of this night and all the nights that follow. Warmth in a place like this is a communal achievement. It belongs to everyone in the room, and everyone in the room contributes to it. And you are contributing to it now simply by being here, simply by adding your own warmth to the warmth that is already present. You find yourself thinking about the people who built this place. Not their names or their stories, those are not yours to know, but simply the fact of them, The hands that cut the timber and set the posts and wove the wool and laid the thatch and built the long hearth of flat stones. They built it to last, you can feel that. They built it with the understanding that it would hold people through many nights like this one, that it would be a place of warmth and rest for a long time after the people who built it had gone. There is something generous in that, something forward-looking in a very quiet way. You are the beneficiary of that generosity tonight, and that thought is a comfortable one, small and warm and without any weight to it. Someone who is now long past built this room, and you are sleeping in it, and the room is doing exactly what it was built to do. The herbs above you, those dried bundles hanging in the high dark places of the room, give off their faint smell most noticeably when the air shifts a little, when whatever small current moves through the longhouse passes through them and carries a little of their scent downward. It is a smell of summers past, of plants gathered when they were full of life and dried slowly in the late warmth, and then hung here to last through the winter. Every time that smell reaches you, it is like a brief and gentle reminder that summer existed, that it will exist again, that the cold and the dark are not permanent, just seasonal, just the way of things. The smell of dried herbs in a winter room carries something of continuity in it, the assurance that things return, that the world has done this before and will do it again, that the seasons know what they are doing. Your body is very still. You notice this in a distant and comfortable way, the way you might notice the temperature of a bath that is exactly right, not because anything is demanding your attention, but simply because stillness itself has become noticeable, because the contrast between the activity of the day and the complete restfulness of now is something that the body registers quietly. You are not trying to be still. You have simply become still the way a surface of water becomes still when the wind has passed, the way a stone becomes still when the river has set it down. Stillness is the natural end of movement, and you have arrived at it without effort, without intention, without even noticing the moment of arrival. The fire makes a sound, a small, soft sound, barely more than a whisper, and one of the smaller logs shifts within the coals. For a moment a few sparks rise from the hearth, very bright against the dimness, and they float upward slowly, following the path that smoke takes, and then they disappear, one by one, fading, before they reach the high dark ceiling. The fire settles again. The sparks are gone. The room is unchanged, and perhaps a little more still than it was before. Each small disturbance in this room seems to make the room more still when it passes, as though the stillness has weight and accumulates, as though the room is settling more deeply into itself with every small movement that rises and subsides. You watch the ceiling. You have been watching it for a while without quite realizing it, or perhaps you have been watching it, and then looking away, and then returning to it, in the way that a sleepy mind returns again and again to the same object of attention, without any particular intention. The ceiling is mostly shadow now, the beams visible only where the faint light from the low fire reaches up to touch them. The thatch between the beams is a dark mass, texture lost in the dimness, just a broad and quiet surface that the room meets at its highest point. Somewhere in that thatch, small creatures are sleeping, birds, perhaps, or the small mammals that find their way into any warm structure and make themselves at home in the places where people rarely look. They are sleeping, too. Everything is sleeping. The night outside is doing nothing. That is the honest way to say it. The night outside is simply existing, simply being dark and cold and still. The way nights in the north exist in the deep hours before dawn, when even the wind has found somewhere to rest and the trees stand without moving and the frozen ground holds its cold quietly. You cannot see any of this from where you lie, but you can feel the sense of it, the vast stillness of the land under the dark sky, and the sense of all that cold stillness outside makes the warmth inside even more real, even more present, even more something to receive with a small and wordless gratitude. The cold is doing what cold does, out in the dark beyond the walls, and you are doing what you do, which is resting, breathing, growing still. The furs have settled around you completely now. They drape over your shoulders and your sides and your feet, and their weight is distributed evenly, and there is no part of you that is cold or uncovered. You are enclosed in warmth in the way that a seed is enclosed in the earth, quietly and without drama, simply present within the warmth, held by it. This is a feeling that asks nothing of you. It requires no response, no acknowledgement, no reciprocation. It is simply a physical fact of this moment, and it is enough. The furs are warm and you are inside the warmth, and the room is quiet, and the fire is low, and there is nothing more that this moment needs to contain. You become aware, in the quietest possible way, of your own heartbeat. Not because it is loud or fast, it is neither of those things, but because the room is so quiet and your body is so still that the small rhythmic motion of it becomes perceptible, a faint pulse that moves through you without effort or urgency. It has been doing this your whole life, this quiet beating, through all the days of movement and activity and noise, and you have rarely noticed it, because usually there is too much else to notice. But here, in this long, dim room, with the fire low and the people sleeping, and the night settled deeply over everything, you can feel it, and it is a reassuring thing to feel, like the ticking of something that has been carefully made and will go on running for a long time. The heart knows what it is doing. It has always known. It does not need your attention to continue. The goats in their corner have grown completely still. One of them has settled onto the ground, folding its legs beneath it in the unhurried way that goats settle when they have decided that remaining upright is more effort than the situation requires. The others may be standing or may have settled as well. It is too dark in that corner to be certain, but none of them are making any sound, and their stillness adds to the general stillness of the room, which has been accumulating all evening, layer by layer, as one thing after another has come to rest. First the children, then the adults, then the fire, and now the goats, and soon perhaps you, and the dog by the door has been resting for a long time already, and there is very little left in this room that is not resting. You take a slow breath and let it out slowly, and the breath moves through you without resistance, in and out the way breath does when the body is relaxed, and the mind is not asking it to do anything more than its simplest and most fundamental task. You take another one, just as slow, just as easy, and it too moves through you and is released. And then there is a moment that is neither breathing in nor breathing out, a moment of suspension that is not tense but simply still, like the top of a swing before it begins to return. This moment, this small pause between breaths, is the quietest moment in the room. In it, nothing is moving at all, and the room is completely still. And then the breath comes in again, slowly, and the pause is over. But it was there, and you noticed it, and there was nothing frightening in it at all. The fire is very low now. What remains of the logs has been consumed down to a core of deep orange coals that glow steadily without flame. Their heat still generous, but their light much reduced, so that the room is darker than it was an hour ago, and the darkness at the edges has grown deeper and closer. This is the way of fires. They give what they have, and then they grow quiet, and the coals that remain after the flames are done are in some ways more honest than the flames themselves, because they are the fire's truest self, the patient and enduring heat at the center of all that brightness and movement. The coals will last until morning. They always do. They hold the warmth through the longest and coldest hours, quietly and without needing to be visible to do it. You find that you are not thinking about anything in particular. This is a pleasant discovery, or rather it is something that you notice without quite discovering it. The way you might notice at some point during a long, quiet walk that you have not been thinking, that your mind has simply been moving through the landscape without attaching itself to any particular thought or concern. The thoughts that were with you earlier in the evening, the thoughts of the road, of the cold, of where you had come from and where you might be going, those thoughts have grown very distant. Or perhaps they have simply stopped being thoughts and become something softer, something more like weather, present but not pressing, there but not requiring any response. Thoughts become weather when the mind is resting, and weather can be observed at a distance in a way that thoughts sometimes cannot. The sleeping people around you breathe in their own rhythms, each one slightly different from the others, each one a small and steady sound in the quiet of the room. If you listen very carefully, you might be able to separate them, to hear the slightly faster breath of one and the deeper, slower breath of another, to hear the way breath sounds when it moves through a large chest, and the way it sounds when it moves through a smaller one. But you are not listening that carefully. You are hearing them all together as a single loose and gentle sound, the way a forest makes a single sound from many different leaves moving in the same breeze, none of them distinguishable from each other at this distance and in this light. Their combined breath is the breath of the room, and the room breathes around you, and you breathe within the room. The wool hanging nearest to you is a panel of undyed cream, its surface rough-textured and slightly uneven, in the way of things that have been made by hand, rather than by any process that demands perfect regularity. In the dim light of the coals, it looks almost white in some places and almost gray in others, the variations in its texture catching and releasing the light in a way that makes it seem to breathe very slightly, to shift, to be almost alive. You have been looking at it without really seeing it, and now you see it, and it is simply a panel of wool, quiet and still, doing what it has been hung here to do, keeping the cold out and the warmth in, asking nothing in return. The wool was once part of an animal that grazed somewhere under the sky, and now it is here on this wall, and it has been transformed into something useful, and there is a long and quiet story in that transformation, though you are not going to tell it now. Your eyelids are heavy. This is not a new or surprising thing. Your eyelids have been tending toward heaviness for some time now, but you notice it more clearly now, as though the heaviness has crossed some threshold of noticeability and is making itself known. When you close your eyes, the darkness behind them is very warm and complete. And when you open them again, the room is dim, and the fire is low, and everything is exactly as you left it. There is no difference between the room with your eyes open and the room with your eyes closed, except that the room with your eyes closed requires no effort at all. The room is the same either way. The warmth is the same. The sounds are the same. And so the choice between eyes open and eyes closed becomes very simple, because one of them requires something and the other requires nothing, and you are in a place and a state where nothing is easier than something. You close your eyes and leave them closed. The darkness is comfortable. It is the darkness of the inside of a warm building on a cold night, rich with the memory of firelight, faintly orange at its edges, and it is not empty but full of the sounds of the room, the slow breath of the dog, the occasional small whisper of the coals, the settling of timber somewhere in the walls, the distant, almost inaudible sound of the wind in the trees outside. These sounds do not disturb the darkness. They simply inhabit it, the way fish inhabit water, moving through it without changing its nature. You listen to the sounds without listening to any one of them in particular, receiving them all together, the way you receive the warmth without preference, without analysis, simply allowing what is present to be present. There is no need to sleep. That is something you understand now in the vague and formless way that understanding comes when the mind is already loosening its grip on precise thought. There is no need to try for sleep, no need to pursue it, no need to notice whether it is coming or not. Sleep is not a destination. It is simply what happens when everything else has been set aside and the body has been given what it needs: warmth, stillness, the absence of demand. You have given it those things. The rest is not yours to arrange. Sleep will arrive the way the tide arrives, not because you have called for it, but because the conditions have been met, because everything is in order, because the time is right, because you have done your part by simply being here and being still. The fire breathes in its slow way, or rather the air above the fire moves in that slow way that makes it seem as though the fire itself is breathing, a gentle rise and movement of heated air that has been rising in this room all evening and will go on rising through the night. The smoke follows this upward movement, taking its time, spreading a little as it rises, finding the gap in the thatch and moving through it into the cold, dark air above, where it disperses into the night without anyone knowing or caring that it was ever smoke at all. It was fire, and then it was smoke, and now it is air, and this is a kind of journey, though it is the quietest possible kind. And it happens every night in rooms like this one, without ceremony and without witnesses. You are very still. You are very warm. The sounds around you are very soft. The Longhouse holds you without any effort on its part. That is what a Longhouse does. It holds. The timber holds the roof holds the thatch holds the warmth, and the warmth holds the people sleeping beneath it. All of it arranged in a simple and very old logic of shelter, of one thing supporting another, of structure existing so that rest becomes possible. You are inside all of that support, all of those layers of holding, and you have nothing to do except be held. There is a great simplicity in being held. It requires no particular skill and no particular effort. It only requires that you stop resisting, which you have done, or rather which has happened, since resistance also requires effort, and effort is something you have very little of left tonight. The dog near the door makes a small sound in its sleep, a sound that is almost, but not quite a whimper, a dream sound, brief and soft and then gone, replaced again by the steady rhythm of its breathing. Whatever it was dreaming, it has passed, or settled into something quieter, or been left behind the way dreams are sometimes left behind even while sleep continues. The dog breathes on steadily, without concern. It was there, and then it was not there, and the breathing went on either way. Time passes in this room the way water passes through still places, slowly, and without leaving much mark of its passing. You are not counting it. There is nothing here to count it with, and no reason to want to. The night is long, and the fire will keep its coals until morning, and the people around you will sleep until the light comes in through the gap in the thatch, and the world outside begins again. Until then, this room is outside of time in the gentle way that all rooms become outside of time when everyone in them is sleeping. Time is for the day, for the market and the field and the road. The night has no use for it, and this room at this hour belongs entirely to the night. You feel the pillow of folded cloth beneath your head. You feel the furs above you. You feel the slight pressure of your own body against the wooden bench, which is not uncomfortable because the hide and the blankets have made it soft enough for a night like this, soft enough for someone who is tired. You feel the warmth of the fire on your face, faint now, the fire being low but still present, a warmth that persists long after it might reasonably have been expected to fade. These are the sensations of this moment, and there are not very many of them, and each one is simple and gentle, and together they make up the whole of what this moment contains, which is enough, which is more than enough, which is everything. The ceiling above you, in the darkness, is just a ceiling. It is the underside of a roof, old and smoke-darkened and solid, and it has nothing to tell you, and no demands to make of you, and looking at it requires nothing, and gives nothing except the simple sense of being inside, being under something, being covered. That is enough. Being covered is enough. The roof is doing its work, which is to keep the cold out and the warmth in, and you are doing your work, which is to rest within the warmth, and everything is fulfilling its purpose quietly and without complaint. You think about nothing, and you think about everything, and these are the same thing now, because the thoughts have lost their edges, lost the sharpness that makes them separate from each other, and they move through your mind the way clouds move on a still day, present, drifting without intention. There was a road, there was cold air, there was a door, and light through the door, and warmth beyond the light. There were furs, and now you are inside the furs, and that is the whole story of this evening, simple and complete and requiring no interpretation. The story does not need an ending because you are inside it, because the story is still happening, because the story is this warmth and this dark and this slow breathing, and all of these things are still continuing. The coals glow in the hearth, patient and orange, and they will go on glowing for a long time. The people in the Longhouse sleep, and they will go on sleeping. The dog near the door breathes in and out, and it will go on breathing. The wind in the trees outside moves softly through the branches, and the branches move and return to stillness, and move again, and return to stillness, as they always have and always will on nights when the wind is gentle and the cold is deep and the world is quiet, in the way that it becomes quiet in the dark hours before anything begins again. All of these things are ongoing. All of these things will continue through the night and past it. You can rest inside their continuation. You are still. You are warm. The sounds around you are small and soft and steady. You are breathing slowly, very slowly, and each breath is easy, and the air is warm and carries the smell of the fire and the herbs and the wool. And receiving it requires nothing of you at all, and releasing it requires nothing of you at all. And between the receiving and the releasing, there is a pause, a small soft pause, that is itself a kind of rest. You count neither the breaths nor the pauses. Counting would require a kind of attention that is no longer available to you, or rather, counting would require a kind of intention that has quietly dissolved into the general warmth and quiet of the room, leaving you only with the breathing itself, which is already happening, which needs no direction from you. The Longhouse is large and dark and warm. The fire is low. The night is still. The furs are heavy over your body. The sounds are soft. The ceiling is dark above you, and the floor is dark below, and the walls are wool and timber, and everything is exactly where it should be, and everyone is sleeping, or almost sleeping, and there is nothing that needs to be done, and nothing that needs to be thought, and nowhere that needs to be reached, and no one waiting to hear from you, and no light that is asking for your attention. There is only this room. There is only this warmth. There is only this darkness and these soft sounds and this slow breathing that moves through you without asking anything in return. Outside, the trees are still. They stand in the dark as they have always stood, rooted and patient, their branches holding whatever the season has placed on them, their bark dark and cold, their interiors living even now in the deep winter, going on being trees, which requires nothing that they do not already have. Trees are very good at waiting. They do it without any sign of impatience, without any sign of noticing the passage of time at all. They simply stand and hold and go on being trees, and this quality in them is something that you can feel even from inside the warm room. A sense of great patience just beyond the walls, a sense of the living world doing what the living world does in the dark, quietly and without witness. The wool panel on the wall moves its slow, barely perceptible movement. The threads at its edge lifting and settling in that faint current of air that seems to circulate in the room without any clear source or direction. You have watched this movement before tonight, and you are watching it again, because it is the kind of thing that the eyes return to when they are tired and warm and looking for something that requires nothing of them. The threads do not change. They lift and settle and lift and settle, and nothing comes of it. Nothing is built or accomplished. And that is exactly right. That is exactly what is needed. This lifting and settling that goes nowhere and means nothing, and is simply the most visible evidence of the air moving through the room, which is itself simply the evidence that the fire is warm and warmth rises, and the room is enclosed and the air circulates within it. All of these things following from one another with the quiet logic of physical things in a warm enclosed space on a cold night. You are not trying to stay awake. You are not trying to stay awake even before you noticed that you were not trying to stay awake. The distinction between wakefulness and sleep has become less distinct, the boundary between them softer, the crossing from one to the other, something that may have already begun without your awareness, in the way that the edge of the dark comes before the deep dark, and the deep dark comes before the early morning, without any moment that you can point to as the exact moment of transition. You are somewhere in the gradual. You are in the place where things are becoming other things without any decision having been made. The coals glow. They have been glowing for a long time, and they will continue to glow. They are very good at this, coals, at holding what fire gave them and releasing it slowly, and continuing to release it long after the fire itself has moved on. They hold the memory of the fire. They are the fire in its most patient form, stripped of brightness and motion, left with only warmth, which is perhaps the most essential thing that fire has to give. You receive that warmth from where you lie, across the short distance between the hearth and your bench, and you receive it without having to do anything, and it continues to come slowly and without interruption, patient as the coals themselves. The dog by the door breathes in and breathes out. You can hear it from here if you listen, and you are listening, or you are simply hearing, which is a different thing, a thing that requires no effort, a thing that happens to you rather than something you do. The breath of the dog is steady and deep and a little slow, the breath of an animal that is thoroughly asleep. And hearing it is like hearing a very simple and very reliable thing. The dog will breathe and you will hear it, and the night will continue, and this is how things are. The Longhouse smells of wood smoke and wool and cold earth, and the faint green smell of dried herbs and something animal and something mineral, the smell of a stone floor that has held fire through many seasons. And all of these smells are familiar in the way that certain places become familiar very quickly, not because you have been there before, but because they smell of things that are fundamental, things that the body recognizes from very deep in its history of being a body in the world. Smoke and animal and earth, warmth and cold held apart by timber and will. These are old smells, and your body knows them, and knowing them is itself a form of rest. You could sleep now. That is perhaps the simplest thing you could say about where you are and what is happening. You could sleep, and there is nothing preventing you, and there is every reason to, and the room is arranged perfectly for it, and the night is at the right depth, and your body is warm and still, and your mind is loose and unhurried, and sleep is not far, has not been far for some time, is perhaps already here in the way that it is sometimes already here before you have acknowledged it, before you have given it permission, before you have even thought to look for it. The warmth of the furs continues. The coals continue their slow giving of heat. The dog breathes near the door. The people sleep along their benches. The goats rest in their corner. The wool panels hang on the walls and stir in the faintest currents of air. The smoke rises through the gap in the thatch. The night holds the Longhouse, and the cold holds the night, and the dark above everything is so vast and so still that the stillness of it filters down through layers of sky and tree and thatch, until it becomes the gentlest possible pressure on the surface of a warm room where many people and a few animals are sleeping. You breathe in, you breathe out. The pause between them is still there, small and soft and complete. You breathe in again. The coals glow orange in the hearth, patient and steady, and they will be glowing still when you wake. or when someone else wakes before you and adds a log, and the fire will find itself again in that log without any drama, drawing on what the coals have kept through the long hours of the night, building itself back into something visible and warm from the patient ember that was there all along. This is the nature of fires in rooms like this. They do not die. They only rest, and resting is not dying. Resting is the space in which continuing becomes possible. The room is very quiet now. Perhaps it was always this quiet, or perhaps the quiet has deepened as the night has deepened, as the sleepers have settled more deeply into sleep, as the fire has reduced itself to its quietest form. You cannot be certain. You only know the quiet as it is now, and as it is now it is very complete, a quiet made of small sounds rather than absence of sound, each small sound so consistent and so gentle that it becomes part of the quiet rather than a disruption of it. The breath of the dog, the warmth of the coals, the movement of air through the room, these are not interruptions. They are the quiet itself, expressing itself in the only way available to it in a room where small living things are breathing. Your thoughts, if you can still call them thoughts, have become very thin and slow, like the last light of an evening that is almost gone, present still, but without much substance, there but not demanding, available but not insisting. A thought about the road thin, a thought about the warmth thin, something about the fire, about how coals are what remains when giving, has been the whole of what a thing has done. But this thought does not develop. It simply arrives and rests and then moves on, the way a slow river moves past a particular stone without stopping. You are in the Longhouse. You are warm. You are still. You are breathing. These are the facts of this moment, and they are enough, and they are more than enough, and they are the entirety of what this moment contains. And this moment is the entirety of what this night requires of you. The warmth from the coals reaches your face, very faintly now, a warmth you might not notice if you were not paying attention in the gentlest possible way, which is the only kind of attention you have left. The warmth is there. You allow it. It rests on your skin without weight and without demand, and you receive it without acknowledgement, simply as a fact of the present moment, simply as one more thing that is true right now in this room. The night goes on in its patient way. It does not hurry. Nights in the north in winter do not hurry. They take their time with the dark. They spend the dark hours slowly and without any sign of regret. And the morning, when it comes, will come gradually, first as a change in the quality of the darkness above the gap in the thatch, then as a faint gray light, then as the beginning of color somewhere in the east, a process so slow it can barely be witnessed. But that is far away from here, far away from this moment, far away from where you are. Where you are is here, in the dark, in the warmth, under the firs, in the Longhouse where the coals glow and the dog breathes and the people sleep and the smoke rises and the wool panels stir on the walls and the night holds everything in its large and patient dark. And you're breathing in and out, and the pause between soft and complete. And then again the coals glow. The dog breathes. The room is warm and still. You are part of the stillness now. You have been part of it for a while, or perhaps you have always been part of it, and tonight is simply the night you have noticed, the night you have settled into it completely enough to feel it around you and within you, the stillness of a warm room in the deep of the night, the stillness of sleeping people, and glowing coals and slow breath and wool on the walls and dark, timber above and cold earth below, and all of it held by the night, all of it part of the night's great quiet patience. The longhouse is warm and dark, the fire is very low, the people sleep, the dog breathes near the door. You breathe with the room, and you are drifting gently and without hurry into the quiet place where the sounds of the room are still present but growing softer, where the warmth of the furs is still present but growing less distinct, where the smell of wood smoke and herbs and wool is still there but fading into something simpler, into something that has no name, into the soft and wordless place that sleep keeps open for you, that sleep has always kept open, that sleep is keeping open right now, warm and dark and patient and complete. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to go anywhere. You are already there. The fire is low, and the night is still, and the longhouse is warm, and everything is quiet, and you are drifting gently and without hurry into the deep and patient dark, and the fire holds its warmth, and the room holds its quiet, and the night holds everything, and everything is still, and everything is warm, and everything is quiet, and you are resting, and the coals glow softly in the hearth, and will go on glowing through the long hours and the cold hours, through all the time that remains between now and the morning, which is a long and gentle interval of warmth and quiet and breathing and rest. And the dog breathes near the door, and will go on breathing, and the darkness is around you and above you and below you, and it is warm darkness, darkness full of the memory of fire and the presence of sleeping people, and the slow sounds of animals, and the distant patience of trees in the cold outside. And you are held in all of that, and you are resting, and the night is long, and the warmth continues, and the sounds continue soft and small and steady, the sounds of a room at rest, the sounds of a night doing what nights do, continuing, breathing, holding, keeping its patient dark for as long as darkness is needed, which is for all of the time that remains between now and the morning, which is a long and gentle interval in which nothing is required and nothing is taken, and everything simply is, simply rests, simply breathes, simply continues without effort, without intention, without anything at all except the warmth and the dark and the slow breath moving through all the sleeping things in this long and quiet room. And you breathe in and you breathe out, and the pause, and the warmth and the dark, and the quiet and the coals, and the dog and the room and the night, and you resting, still, warm, here,